Here's today's project. We're going to can 14 pounds of ground beef. This is a sample of the meat I've canned. I started out with chicken back in January, and that's beef, cubed beef. Got some pork, which was in April, and also in April was ground beef, which we're going to do on this video. But they're all good for up to a year. Some people claim they can go a couple years on them. But we're going to show you how to can beef on this video. Alright, I forgot I also canned some chili. Just made up the chili like you would normally do for dinner and then can it. This was back in April. Okay, now we're going to start browning the ground beef. It's going to be 14 pounds, so it's going to be a little while. And I'll come back when I got all the ground beef browned up and show you what we do next. Okay, so here's the process I got going. I got the meat browning, and when it browns, I put it over here into a strainer. So the strainer drains all the fat out, and then once that drains out, put it in the bowl. Okay, if you want to get into canning, pressure cooking and all that, I highly recommend you get this Ball Blue Book Guide to Preserving. You can find it on Amazon.com for 10 or 11 bucks. Maybe used a little bit cheaper, but it has tons of recipes and procedures for how you pressure cook meat and vegetables, just all kinds of things. It's really well worth it to pick that up. And this is what I wound up with after browning all the hamburger. Filling up this stainless steel bowl, large bowl. Look at all that meat. Okay, now we're filling up our jars with the ground beef. And I use quart jars. I like to use the wide mouth. I have used the regular size for chili. Stuff that's easy to pour out. Pack it down. Make sure you get as much of the air out as you can and as much as the meat in there as you can. And you want to fill it up to right below the rim, about an inch or so below the rim, below the threads. Pack it down nice and good, and then come back in a little bit and we'll put the lids on. Show you how that goes. Okay, as far as putting the lids on, first thing I do is I get a little bit of this white vinegar. Paper towel. Just kind of wipe around the rim. Make sure it's all clean. You don't have any of the meat that's going to maybe ruin the seal from the lid. So make sure that's all clean. That's looking good. And then over here in this pan I got some water that I just brought to a simmer, and I put the lids in, seal down. Just helps to get the seal here a little bit softened up. A little better seal for the jar. Pop them on top. Get your ring. And just go finger tight. You don't have to crank down on it. Just go to where it's finger tight, where it's kind of tight. And then you're ready to go. So I'll get the rest of the rings on these and we'll put them in the pressure canner and get going. Okay, here's the pressure canner. I have an All-American. It holds, I could get 7 quarts in here at a time. Here's the tray that goes on the bottom. You want to make sure that it's the right way to where it's lifted up off the bottom so the jars aren't sitting directly on the bottom. Then you just set your jars in here. We'll fill it up with water about halfway up the jar, and I'll show you how to put the lid on. Okay, I got my water in there. I normally leave 1 jar out so I can have room to pour the water. And they say you might want to pour some vinegar in. I use white vinegar. Can you see that? just a little bit in the water. It's supposed to help it if you have hard water from staining the inside of the pressure tank. So then we put our last jar in, check our levels. They look pretty good. The water's about halfway up. Don't know how well you can see the water in there, but it's about halfway up. And then you want to space these fairly evenly. It's not vital. Just make sure they're all in there. Now they're ready to go. Next, we'll put the lid on. Alright, here's an important point. Can you see light through that hole? Well, that's the vent hole. You want to make sure that's clear before you start putting pressure on this thing. Kind of lost it. See if I can get it. There we go. Alright, let's get this lid on. Okay, before the lid goes on, you want to get some olive oil on a paper towel or a rag, and you want to see this bottom edge of this lid right here? You want to just, right at the bottom edge, you want to put just a line of olive oil all the way around. Helps to keep the lid from sticking to the pan here. Okay, now it's time to put the lid on. They make it really simple to line it up. See this indent right here on the bottom part? And let me see if I can get this in here. You got an arrow on the lid. So what you do is you just line the two up. Okay, once you set your lid down on, you want to make sure this space right here between the lid and the bottom part, see that space? You want to make sure all the way around that that's fairly even, because this lid will rock back and forth on top. So you want to make it so it's fairly even. And then you swing these fasteners up, they swing up, and you tighten them down, and I'll show you how to do that next. Okay, the lid's on, and you want to do these fasteners just to where it barely is pressure. See that? I'm trying to hold the camera up here. And then you do the opposite ones. Just barely tighten opposite, just like you would like your lug nuts on a car, on a wheel. So I'll get all these up and fastened, and then we'll turn the heat on. Now once your fasteners are all in place, you want to go ahead and tighten them down slowly, opposite sides. So you'll start with, say, this one and that one, and then you jump over to this and over here, and then so forth, opposite sides, until they're all pretty tightened down, pretty tight. So that's how you get the lid on. The heat is on. Now we're going to have that on until we start getting steam coming out of the vent. And once the steam starts shooting out of the vent, we let that go for about 10 minutes. It's called venting. And then we'll put the weight on, and I'll show you when we get to that step. Alright, it's starting to get close to venting, as you can see, but that's not where we're at. We're not going to start the 10-minute timer yet. I'll come back and show you what it's supposed to look like once we start the timer. Alright, we got a full vent going now. Now we'll let it go for 10 minutes, and then we'll put the weight on. Here's the weight we use for the pressure cooker. As you see, it has numbers on it. We're going to use number 10. That's the recommended setting, and that's the hole right there that goes over the vent. And that's the recommended setting from the ball book for our elevation. We'll set this on when the 10-minute venting period is up, and then we'll start our 90-minute cooking process. But there's the hole. Just sets right on top of the vent. There, we got the weight on there. Make sure you use a glove. And we'll keep it on high until the gauge gets up to 240 degrees, 10 pounds of pressure. And then that weight will start rattling, and we'll turn the heat down to keep that constant 240. Okay, we just went over the 240 degree mark, and as you can see, the weight's starting to jiggle. So we're going to turn the heat down a little bit and get that weight to where it jiggles about 3 or 4 times a minute. Alright, we're going to start our 90-minute timer and turn the heat down. Now you'll have to figure out on your oven what gauge. There's a certain spot, and I figured out it's about right here. To get it to jiggle a few times a minute, you don't want to have it jiggling constantly, but you'll have to mess around with it, figure out your own stove. Okay, now our 90 minutes is up. We turn the heat all the way to off and leave it alone. Don't take the weight off. Just walk away until the meter drops all the way down to 0. And when it does that, we'll come back and we'll take the lid off. Okay, the pressure has reached 0, so we're ready to take the lid off. Take the weight off. Let's see the lid here. And be sure when you take the lid off that you aim it away from you so you don't get scalded by the steam. Now we can take the jars out, set them on a towel on the counter. You don't want to set them directly on to the counter itself. You want to have a towel or a board. So we'll get the rest of these out and show you what it looks like. Yeah, that's the sound we want to hear. All those pings you hear is the seal happening. That's the sound we're looking for. A successful seal. Well, there they are, 7 quarts of cooked ground beef. Now I just let them sit out and cool. I'm going to let them sit out overnight actually. And then in the morning I'll wipe them down. Probably might be a little bit of residue on the outside of the jar, so I'll wipe them down. Right on the lids, the date and the kind of meat it is. And you're good to go. You can put it in the pantry, cupboard. This does not require refrigeration. It'll last for up to a year. And when you're ready to use it, just make sure you hear that seal break. And then just heat it up like you would do if you're making tacos, add spice to it. But all you gotta do is heat it up. You don't need to cook it anymore. It's already cooked. As you can tell during the cooking process, it settled down some. We started out with pretty full jars, but see, you can see how much it's dropped down. But it's cooked. And by the way, I didn't use all 14 pounds in these jars. I probably had about 3 pounds left over of the browned ground beef that I made. So I just put it in the fridge, and we will use that tomorrow and maybe the next day for dinner that way. And then put these away for whenever we need them. Hey, I hope I've inspired you to maybe consider canning your own meat. It's not that difficult. In fact, if you can do chicken and beef and pork. All you do that way is with chicken breast, I'll maybe cut them in half, the breasts, boneless, skinless, and you just put it right in the jar raw. Put a teaspoon of salt in there and cook them the exact same way we just did this beef. You don't need to pre-cook the chicken or the cubed beef or pork or whatever. It's ready to go in there raw and cooked. Amazing, isn't it? Alright, I'm going to sign off now, and I hope you are encouraged to can your own meat. Hope this helps. I'll talk to you soon. Okay, it's the morning after now, and I just wanted to give you a quick shot of what it looks like sitting out overnight. As you can see, there's still some fat in there that solidified. Even though we drained it, let it sit in the strainer, there's still a little bit of fat in there, but that's okay. That will render out when you heat it up. But that's it.